Hello, guys. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. Hello, Paulina, Oscar, Liz, Andy. We'll get started here in just a few minutes as more folks get into the class.
Hello, Ben. I have a question about using the idiom big time. For example, I heard like he's struggling big time, or I'm not sure, but some ways to use big time. I wanted to ask you.
Okay. Yeah. So big time is an idiomatic expression. It's informal. It's a colloquialism. Big time just means a lot. So you could say, "Oh, I like this person a lot, big time. I like this person big time. I hate this person big time." Right? It's basically saying, "Oh, I'd love to do something. I want to do this big time." Big time just means a lot. And it's very idiomatic. It's slang. You wouldn't use it necessarily in a formal situation, but it's very common in informal discussions and talk.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Sure. Marifer, hello. Najeli, hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey guys, I want to go ahead and get started. Today we've got a lot to do as far as trying to finish our assignment for this week. This week we've been focusing on doing an interview with a family member, someone that we live with, someone we know well. And one of the main intentions, one of the main reasons for doing this interview is to try to learn through the interview something new that maybe we didn't know much about prior to the interview. So keep that in mind whenever you're developing your paragraph for this week, is that we want to try to find some new information, something maybe that we were surprised about during the interview. I want to share with you guys too an example, actually share two examples of a topic sentence that I think might help you in thinking about how to develop the main idea of your paragraph for this assignment. And I think it also will shed light on what else you need to consider when you're developing your paragraph. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go into Microsoft Teams under Files. Go to week 11. And I'm going to go under the interview guides folder. This is where we were working. I think on Tuesday we started working with our interview guide. And so I think that when we develop our first sentence of our paragraph, our topic sentence, I think it's going to help us to bring information from this first section of our interview guide and bring some of this information into our topic sentence. So I have a couple of examples here. Let's look at the first one, and then we'll see what kind of information we drew upon from this upper section of our interview guide. So here's the first example. It reads, I decided to interview my brother because I knew he always wanted to open his own restaurant, but never realized the work and dedication he endured to achieve his professional goals. Now, if you look at this sentence, this topic sentence, again, this is going to be the very first sentence of our paragraph that's going to represent the main idea of our paragraph. You'll notice that this sentence is divided into two main sections. Let's look at the first section to see what kind of information from our interview guide we're using. So again, it begins, I decided to interview my brother. All right, so, well, we know who the interviewee is. I can say my brother, my mother, my father. I can also include the person's name. I can say my brother Tim. It's up to you whether or not you want to use the real name. It's up to you completely. Either way is fine. But I've indicated the person that I'm that I interviewed. So I decided to interview my brother because I knew he always wanted to open his own restaurant. Now, this is sharing some information that I already knew about my brother. All right. And it probably will relate to some of the specific topics during the interview. If you notice here, that's one of our sections in our interview guide, is to indicate the specific topics that we plan to cover. So when I prepared for this interview, I probably prepared questions related to the opening of his restaurant. Okay, and thinking about why it happened, when it happened, where it happened, with whom it happened, etc. But this is all information that I had already planned, that I already knew about my brother. Now, the second clause of this topic sentence begins with but, and it continues, but never realized the work and dedication he endured to achieve his professional goals. This is new information. This is likely to have fallen under this category, surprising aspects about the interview. And this is really at the heart of what this interview is meant to be. It's meant to provide you an opportunity to find out something new about your family member, right? So if you put some information here, some surprising aspects about the interview, some things that you didn't know, that you didn't expect in this conversation, well, then you might include that information in your topic sentence, in this case, in the second clause, to say something like, well, I never realized that, I didn't know that, etc. Let's look at a second example. It's very similar in structure. It begins, I wanted to interview my grandmother because she always used to discuss coming from a poor upbringing. But I never knew that she also had many fond memories of growing up as a dancer. So this is very similar. I'm using different language, but the structure, the grammatical structure is very similar. It begins, I wanted to interview my grandmother. Again, I'm mentioning the person I interviewed. And I continue by saying she always used to discuss coming up from a poor upbringing, a poor childhood, right? This is something that I already knew about my grandmother. And this is something that I probably developed as specific topics to cover during the interview. I probably knew that I was going to be asking questions about her upbringing as a child, right? How her experience was as a child, because I know from prior conversations, just because I know my grandmother, she has talked about it before, I know this about her already. But during the interview, right, there may have been some surprises. And so let's assume that during my interview with my grandmother, she starts to talk about really great, wonderful memories of being a dancer. Maybe she took dance classes. Maybe she went out and she performed someplace and it was really special for her. And I had no idea about that experience. And so this would be something new, and this might fall under this category, the bottom, surprising aspects about the interview. So notice that here in both examples, we have basically two different clauses that serve two different purposes. The first clause is basically saying something that we already knew about the person that we interviewed. It's something that we planned on. It's something that we actually thought about beforehand and planned on asking questions, and we even probably knew that we would get certain types of answers. But the second clause, and probably the most important, is you now sharing and reporting from your interview something new, something that you didn't expect from your conversation. So I would suggest using a very similar grammatical structured sentence. Okay, this is why I'm providing these examples, because I want you to use these similar grammatical structures in your own topic sentence. Of course, you're going to include your own person that you interviewed. Of course, you're going to have different information about specific topics that you covered and surprising aspects. But feel free to use this similar structure when you're developing your body paragraph. I'm sorry, not your body paragraph, but your topic sentence. Now, after you've developed your topic sentence, and this is something I noticed in the group from this morning in Prope A, the topic sentence, the first sentence that I'm asking you to write that includes some of this information from your interview guide should only be one sentence. Should only be one sentence. Your topic sentence should be one sentence. After the topic sentence, that is the second sentence of your paragraph, you need to begin with your indirect question. Remember, you're going to have basically, after your topic sentence, you're going to have three basic types of sentences. You're going to have sentences that are going to be reporting your indirect questions that you asked. You're going to have sentences that are going to report on the responses of your interviewees. And the third type of sentence, and the most important, is your reflection. You're commenting on the results. It's your interpretation. How do you feel about those responses? What did you learn about the person that you interviewed? Right? And this is where you can offer your own reflection based on the responses and the questions that you asked. But notice the order of the questions. We're going to begin with the indirect question, right? Because that's what happens, right? When in an interview, you ask the question first and then they answer. So when you report, guess what you have to start with? The indirect question. The indirect question that you asked to your interviewee. So again, you're going to begin with the indirect question, and then you're going to report the answers. And then you're going to have two options. You can immediately offer your reflection, and you can talk about that particular response. And then you could go on to another indirect question, and that response to that indirect question in a short reflection, and then a third indirect question and a response, and then your reflection. That's one way. Or you might decide to begin with an indirect question, followed by the response, and then a second indirect question followed by a response, followed by a third indirect question, for example, and a response. And then at the end of the paragraph, you offer your full reflection, your explanation of the responses to all of the responses that you included in your paragraph. In other words, you're saving your reflection at the end of the paragraph. All right. So again, indirect question, a response, and a reflection. Be very careful in the order in which you present those three types of sentences. They're very different. They serve totally different purposes, and you need to be careful in the order that you present. Remember that the topic sentence that includes some of this information from the interview guide doesn't have to include all of the information, but it should include some. It needs to be one sentence. And I think for sure what you need to include are the specific topics that you covered and the surprising aspects. Again, as we have seen now in these two examples, the first clause primarily is going to talk about the specific topics that you plan to cover, that you already knew. And the second clause deals more with the new information or the surprising aspects of your interview. Up to this point, guys, are there any questions about the topic sentence or how you're organizing your sentences in terms of the indirect question and the response? Any questions? Well, if there are no more questions, then for the rest of the class today, for this assignment, I would like for you to continue working in your interview results wiki, your individual wiki. In order to get full credit for this assignment, you need to have uploaded first in your wiki that we started yesterday, and we're going to continue today. You need to have your outline and your written paragraph above the outline. Please make sure that, as we talked about yesterday, that the results fall under as a sub-bullet to the question here. Try to organize your questions, your responses, and even the follow-up questions and the follow-up responses in an outline form. Okay, remember the easiest way to do an outline is you can use the bullet points and use the tab, and that will automatically create a sub-bullet. And here to my wiki, click edit. And I'll wait because my internet's slow. And I'll wait some more. And then here, so let's say you have your first question. So remember you have your first question. So you write out the question, you hit enter, and then you hit tab. And notice it automatically creates a sub-bullet point. So I'm going to have the response to this question. Now, let's say that I have a follow-up question to that response. Well, I want to do the same. I want to put a sub-bullet under that response because this question relates to that response. So here I'm going to have my first follow-up question. And guess what? Then I'm going to have my follow-up response. All right, so this is what I would like to see here when you develop your outline to present the questions as follows. You can, again, present these questions and responses in any order that you want, right? It doesn't matter if you change the order or if it makes better sense to organize the questions in a different fashion, that's fine. But I would like for, especially when you have follow-up questions, and certainly the responses to the questions need to fall under the respective question that it applies to, right? And again, the easiest way to do that is using an outline form. Now, if things get kind of turned around and you need to move bullet points in and out, like indent, you can also use these two icons, decrease indent and increase indent. So notice here I have a response. If I decrease it, it pulls it out, or you can go back in. You can even go further in and out like that, right, with these two icons. You can also use the tab if you're just typing the question itself. But I try to present your outline like I've explained it here. And again, make sure the paragraph is up here at the top. When you finish the paragraph and you've highlighted all of the grammar points as mentioned in this list, reduced adjective clauses underlined, conditions are in bold, indirect questions with green text, green font, and transitions are italicized. Once you've completed all of that in your individual wiki, then you can copy your final text and go back to the page. And scroll down all the way underneath assessment. And click where it says reported speech. This is where the actual assignment is. And this is where I'm asking you to copy and paste the text that you finished in the wiki, upload it here to this assignment. These instructions are the exact same instructions that you find in the wiki. But again, make sure that, as I noted here, that you have your outline and your full paragraph first in the wiki before you upload it to this assignment. Any questions about the actual assignment, the steps here that I've explained, and presenting and completing this assignment, which is actually scheduled for tomorrow. I'm going to give everyone another day if you need it. All day tomorrow if you need more time to complete this assignment. But are there any questions about how to submit?
Ben, I have a question about the wiki. So we made make some changes in the wiki, like adding more questions that I maybe think today or yesterday.
I'm sorry, Oscar, are you asking if you can add questions to your outline? Was that your question?
Yep. Oh, for example, if maybe I thought about a new question and then I asked to my sister, may I add this information to the wiki?
Yes, sure, absolutely. If at any point this week you realize that you need more information, and honestly, I think most of us probably need to go back and ask more questions, but I know we're getting close, right, to the end of the assignment. So depending on how much time you need to complete the assignment, if you're still adding questions, that's fine. I only ask that for the final text that you upload for this assignment, that your outline reflects the questions that you included in your text. Don't include something in your final text, in your paragraph, that you don't have in your outline. But certainly, if you have to add more information to your outline and then and include that in your paragraph, that's fine. At the other side, on the other point of this, is that if you have questions in the outline that you don't include in your paragraph, that's okay too. It's better to have it in the outline and not need it. That's fine, but not the other way around. To have it in the text, but not have it in the outline. Okay, the outline is still kind of a brainstorming activity. It's more like you putting your ideas together from the interview, and then you should be able to look at that outline and say, okay, I've got a lot of information here I can talk about. How do I want to present it now in a coherent and cohesive fashion, right? So again, if you have something in your outline that you don't include in the paragraph and you don't need it, that's fine. Okay, but make sure that you have it in the outline if you include it in your text. Does that answer your question, Oscar?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions, guys, about anything we've done basically this week regarding the interview?
Ben, do we have to include the outline that we wrote in Microsoft Teams to the wiki, or just like the question and the answer?
In the wiki or in the final assignment?
No, in the wiki.
Okay, in the wiki, and let me go back. Let me make sure I understand your question, Wendy, and tell me if I'm not answering your question. So in wiki, let me go back to my wiki here. In your wiki, you should have basically two things. In your wiki, individual wiki, everybody's going to have their own wiki. You should have your outline that has both your questions and the responses to those questions and any follow-up questions and follow-up responses. All of that information is going to be taken from the interview, and that should be in your individual wiki. That's what we did on, I think we started on Wednesday. We did that, I believe. And then yesterday we started developing the paragraph that is taking this information from the outline that's in the wiki and on Thursday in the wiki, we also started to develop the paragraph that was going to be in text form, basically you reporting what you interviewed or who you interviewed and the details. So you need to have your paragraph here above the outline. So your wiki is going to have both the outline and the text. Now for the assignment, to actually finish the assignment, I'm asking that you just copy your finished text when you have completed your paragraph in the wiki, then copy that text and upload it to the assignment under week 11 that's called Group of Speech. If you click here, and it'll take a second to open, and then here is where I would like for you to submit your final paragraph that you developed in your wiki. You do not have to include the outline in the assignment here, only the text, okay? But I would like to see the outline in your wiki. When I look at your final paragraph in this assignment, I'm going to also have opened up your wiki, because I want to look at your wiki outline and your final paragraph here. Okay, so does that answer your question, Linda?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Any other questions, guys? If there are no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic, and I'm going to continue looking around here in the different wikis. If you want me to look at something in particular, and you don't have to have a finished paragraph, if you want me to look at something, or if you have a specific question about something, unmute your microphone, let me know, and we'll discuss it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mute my mic.
Ben, can you check my paragraph?
Yes, I'll check it right now.
Ben, are you going to share your screen because I have like a few questions?
Sure. I'll share my screen. Okay, I don't know if you can see, it's a little small, the text, but do you want to go ahead and ask your questions first?
For example, when I want to introduce like a direct question, which punctuation marks do I need? Like colon and then quotation mark and then my question, or how?
Okay, so I'm looking at, let me start with the first sentence here to say that. Okay, so I think I like your first sentence, your topic sentence. The only thing I would also suggest is to include something, if you found something surprising or something maybe that you learned more about, if you could include that piece in the first sentence, that would be really, I think, interesting addition. I think I would try to do that. If in your interview you found something surprising, maybe that you didn't know before. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So the second sentence, because of the, okay. So your second sentence, you begin with an indirect question, and it's fine. I don't know if you have a specific question about that second sentence, but that's is good. That's fine. Did you have a question about your second sentence, the indirect question?
No, just when I introduced a direct question, I want to know like the punctuation marks that I should use.
Okay, so in your second sentence, um, your punctuation is correct. You don't need anything. You say, I asked him if he ever thought about what he wanted to study in the future. So you don't need any punctuation marks. Because I'm asking everyone to present an indirect question, you're not going to be quoting yourself. You're not going to say, I asked, comma, quotation marks. What did you, or that would be the direct question, right? So you would only need the punctuation, the comma, and the quotation marks when you're asking a direct question in this case. Um, and otherwise you don't need any punctuation marks when you're basically paraphrasing what you asked, and you're just converting it from a direct question to an indirect question. And so if your question is about responses, you actually have two options. You can direct quote him like you're doing here. Certainly, okay, we'll come back to certainly, but you say, he stated, comma, quotation marks. I wasn't sure about it. Now, I'm assuming that this is a direct quote. So you're taking word for word what he said. I wasn't sure about it. I didn't have the time and all of that, right? So if you conducted your interview in English, and this is what he said, then this is correct. This is a direct quote. If you had the interview in Spanish and he answered in Spanish, I would just paraphrase and translate at the same time. I would just say, he stated that, and then in your own words, state in English what he said in Spanish. But to
Oh
answer
yeah,
your question,
I made it in English.
okay. So if let's say that somebody, because we all make mistakes when we speak, all right, everybody, if he is answering and he's speaking in English, and let's say he makes a grammatical mistake, it's our job as the writers to correct the mistake. And I think we did this, I don't know if it was this semester with you guys or last semester, but we did an exercise actually of how to correct incorrect grammar when we're writing. But if you need to do that, and this is just as an example, let's say, oh, well, I can't, let's see if I can, I'm going to go to the comments here, because I think this is also important for everyone. If you guys are direct quoting someone and they make a mistake, make sure that we correct the mistake, not to leave a grammatical mistake, even if it's a direct quote, and that's what they said. So let's say that, let's say here, if I say something like this, my internet's a little slow at the moment. So let's say that they say, okay, just as an example, let's say that she said, um, and these were her exact words. She said, she weren't there, and it's a mistake, right? She wasn't there is the correction. So you want to write it instead like, and I'm assuming, let's say that who you're talking to is your mother, and your mother is referring to her daughter or your sister, okay, whatever. So that's why she's using the same pronoun. So she would say she, and then you would have a bracket, if I can find the bracket here. So it would be something like that, right? So you just put in the brackets the correction, right, that corrects the grammatical mistake, basically. Okay, so basically when you're reporting, guys, just decide if you want to paraphrase or if you want to quote. It's either way is fine. Just to remember that I think, Wendy, in your case, I think you had an extra space after the quote, so make sure there's no space after the quotation mark. Let me find it here quick. So see how you have a space before I wasn't sure about it. So make sure there's no space there, and the direct quotes and then the period, that's fine. Okay, so let's see, did you have, okay, so here I see where you say, so I asked, was it, now this is where you're, see how the difference between this question, where you say, so I asked, comma, was it high school, versus the first question that you asked, all right? You want to write it out as an indirect question. All the questions that you asked that you're going to report in this paragraph, I would write it as an indirect question, and then you can label it as such, as we've indicated here. Indirect questions, you can use green font for that. Okay, Wendy, does that answer your question?
So do we have to put just indirect question then?
I would, yes. You need to have at least two for sure, but I would write it out. It sounds a little more natural to when you're reporting to write them out as indirect questions.
Oh, okay.
But
Thank you.
as long as you have, I mean, for the assignment, if you have at least two indirect questions and you label those, that's fine. I just want to make sure you guys can write out indirect questions. Um, so I'll leave it up to you if you want to include also some direct questions, but at least two indirect. And I think the punctuation that you have is correct. There's, like I said here, I would just remove this one space before I. But I think in general, that's fine. And I just noticed this. You say I ask and then a colon. So we never want to put a colon after a verb. That's a kind of a general rule that you can apply pretty much across the board. You want to avoid using a colon after a verb.
How do I correct it?
Use a comma. You do it almost every time. I think it was just just you missed it because you do it correctly almost in fact every other time you did it, you're using a comma. He sadly stated comma. He stated comma, right? So that's correct. But I think I don't know what happened there, but here you have a colon. Because I wanted to go deeper into the recognition, I asked comma, right? I think you have a lot of direct quotes, and, maybe, I'm not saying eliminate all of them, but I think you can paraphrase a little bit more generally. Paraphrase or write out indirect questions. I would only quote Wendy when there's something, the way in which the, in this case, your father responded, if he responded in such like a unique way or a special way that you really want to capture, then I would use direct quotes. If not, then you're usually better off just paraphrasing.
Okay, okay.
Okay, I'm noticing here again, up here you say, I came up with the following question. That's grammatically correct. I don't know. Let's see. As soon as you hear, okay, that's okay. But again, here's the thing. Like in this case, I think just writing out an indirect question, I think would be better off. It looks like you're missing the quotation marks too, the ending quotation marks. And notice here you have a question mark and a period. So you'll never want to include more than one ending punctuation mark. It's either going to be one or the other. So take a look also at that. Um, and here, as soon as heard his answer, I guess you want to say as soon as I heard his answer. I mean, this is, unless, how do I say this? Like if you were surprised, I wouldn't include so many details in terms of like, this is like an example. You heard the answer and then you came up with the question. If there's something else though if there's something that surprised you, then say something surprised you. If something shocked you, or there's nothing wrong with showing some emotion in how you're transitioning. But I would avoid just kind of I would call it like the mundane, just the normal, okay, as soon as I heard the answer, I came up with the following. Now, if you could say something like, well, hearing him explain that this da 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 da, I decided to ask this question, right? So I'm actually explaining the reasoning why I thought in the moment coming up with that question, but it was based on something that he said, and you're telling the reader what it is that actually drew your attention to ask the next question. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. Anything else, Wendy? It looks good, though. You've got a really good start here. It looks good. There are really no major grammatical issues, just some small things.
Can you please tell me again, where do I have like those punctuation mistakes?
Okay, so I notice here, I don't know if you're looking at my screen here, but it's
Yes.
hard to, for some reason, I can't highlight for some reason. I'm trying here, but it's not. Let me see if I can edit your wiki. Will it let me? No, I don't have to. I think my computer is frozen, so bear with me here. The first one is before I, where you say I wasn't sure about it. So you want to remove that space. You don't want to have any space between the quotation mark and your pronoun I. The next, let's see. In general, I would try to paraphrase a little bit more. Here you have, let's see, no, it's okay. All right, down at the bottom here you say, because I wanted to go deeper into this declaration, I asked, and you have a colon. I would use a comma. And again, you do this again where you say, because I wanted to go deeper in, so why did you want to go deeper into the declaration? Say, go ahead and tell the reader what your purpose was for asking this question. And when you say this declaration, I wouldn't say declaration. I would say, paraphrase what he told you, right? So again, you're just kind of making it very clear, right, why you're asking certain questions. And I think it's really good you're doing this, but keep it as reflective as possible so that the reader kind of gets some insight into your thought process why you decided to ask this, right? Because we don't want the reader to say, well, because I wanted to go deeper in this declaration. You don't want them to ask, well, why did Wendy want to go deeper into that declaration? I mean, was there something interesting for her to really drive her to ask the next question? Right? You don't want the reader to ask that question. So make it explicit. And again, I like how you're doing this, how you're kind of prepping some of these questions, right, in your writing. But try to reveal a little bit more about your thought process. And I think if you can do that, you're going to have a much better paragraph as a result. You're going to be really reflecting to the reader, you know, what drove you to write, to come up with these questions, you know, during the interview. As far as your punctuation, I think that I just see two essentially, the space here and then the colon, just offhand. I think that's, everything else looks okay. In general, I think less quotation marks might be helpful as well.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Alrighty, you're welcome. Anybody else want me to look at something?
Ben, can you check mine?
Sure, Monte. Do you want me to pull it up on the screen or not?
No, yeah, sure, it's okay.
Okay. Okay, Monte, do you have your paragraph here in your wiki, or am I in the wrong place?
Yes, it is in my wiki.
All right. Is this, yeah, I don't know if you see my screen. Do I have the right wiki here? It says, are you happy with the major that you're studying? Is that you?
Which one?
Where it says, are you happy? This is Monse, no?
Yes. Yes, that's mine.
Okay, do you see my screen?
No.
You don't see my screen. Okay,
No.
let me try again. How about now?
Yes.
Oops. Okay, let me, that's weird. That's not, okay, this one. Is this your wiki? Or did you save your wiki, Mr.
Yeah, I just saved it like 1 minute ago.
Oh my God, so maybe, let me refresh. Okay. All right, I think is this you then? Is this right? I interviewed my cousin?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right, I would move your paragraph just towards the top of the wiki.
Yeah.
And let's see, I interviewed my cousin because I was amazed at the choice she made. Okay, all right. All right, good. I like how you included the new information in after the because clause. All right, so that's good. That's interesting. if you can include information about the purpose of your interview in addition to what you included here, that would be nice. Like, so you actually would have like two clauses. One that might say something like, you had planned to ask your questions about this, then you could say, and I was amazed, right? And then talk about
Mhm.
what amazed you during the interview. So we grew together. We grew together. It was amazing. All right. So starting with your second sentence. All right. So this is where the organization of the three different types of sentences begins. Starting with the second sentence. Your second sentence should begin with one of the questions that you have up here in your outline. And you can decide which question that you want to start with. You decide. It doesn't have to be the order in which you ask the questions during the interview.
Mhm.
It could be, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
So you decide, and then you introduce your first question. So it would be something like, you might say in the second sentence, so I asked Mom, are you happy? I asked Mom if she was happy with the major that she is studying or was studying, right? So it depends on if she's studying right now or if she studied in the past. You decide, you just use the right verb tense. But I would start off with the first indirect question. And then the third sentence is her answer, right? And then
Mhm.
you can decide from there if you're going to ask another question and then a response, or if you want to reflect on her response from your first question. And you can decide on how you want to organize that. But remember that the questions come before the responses in your reporting.
Mhm.
So your indirect question, again, should begin from the second sentence.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just quickly looking at, there's no major grammar issues here, but I want you to pay really close attention to the order in which you're reporting so that your ideas follow kind of a logical flow, right? A logical reasoning.
Okay.
All righty,
Yeah.
very good. All right. Okay, guys, it looks like we're about out of time for today. I think we'll go ahead and stop there. Any questions about this activity that we're working on today? Again, I want to give everyone until tomorrow, if you need it, to complete your paragraph. We're not going to have a lot of time for me to give you further feedback, like asynchronously, like if you send me a message. But if you guys have concerns about the assignment and you want to schedule time to chat in real time and ask your questions, just send me a message in chat in Microsoft Teams and we can schedule that time. But at this point, go ahead and try to complete the assignment for tomorrow so that you finish on time. Any final questions, guys? Yeah, I'm seeing here sometimes the audio is bad. I don't know. It started raining like crazy here at the house, so I don't know if that caused some issues, but hopefully the audio and the recording is good enough, and I'm going to make that available as soon as we finish today's broadcast, and so that you can, if you need to, you can go back to the recording and hopefully get what you missed. So if there are no more questions, I think we'll stop there, and you guys have a good weekend. We'll see everybody on Monday, and we'll continue on with the next concept for next week. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. See you soon.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.